Hi.
Hey,
How
hello?
are you doing?
Can you hear me? How's
I
it
do.
going?
How are
Doing
you doing?
good.
I don't see your beeple on your sofa.
One
That's
second
okay.
here. Let me mute one of these sounds. This stupid thing. The my mouse keeps disconnecting and connecting. We're going to say sound stop playing. Device connect. Come on. The beeples, oh, they're right here. They're just up a little further.
There are two.
Oh, there's a bunch of them. So now we just noticed that people are starting to buy them. People recognize that they're worth more than $20 on eBay. So now they're like $200 or like $1,000 to get those. And they were never like that. But now people like enough
Wow.
people understand why they might have more value than that. And so they're
That's probably because of you.
yeah, no, I'm sure it's definitely. I've been buying them for 15 years. They've
Oh,
never been more than $20, and now suddenly they're $1,000 on eBay.
aha.
Yeah.
Well, so how are you? How have you been all this? There's a trip to Hawaii and many things.
Yeah, good. It was definitely, we finished the spring collection
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, and now we're making the actual sort of like we have to make like 500 of these boxes with the like lights and everything. So, oh, this doesn't have the like screen in it. So we have to make a buttload of these boxes and ship them. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the sort of like next phase is making a bunch of these. We have to make 500 of these boxes that have all the like lights and all this like, sort of crazy crap. And they're all different, like a bunch of different versions of this. Some are made out of like, some have like wood inlays. Some of them have like 24 karat gold.
I
Like,
saw that on the internet.
what's
The
up?
gold
Yeah, the
one.
like
Someone.
bowl one. So we've got to make a bunch of these. We've got to make 500 of those boxes in like the next month, roughly.
So, uh, how do you feel about that? About making physical objects?
I like it a lot. I like it a lot. It's definitely very fun, and it's been super inspiring because it's just so new, but there's so many possibilities. And I feel like I don't really see many artists using screens as a medium. I think obviously like Nam June Pak or whatever was doing it, 30 years ago or whatever, but obviously screen technology has and electronics have increased quite a bit since then. And so there's maybe worth another second look at what could be done with screens, especially with rendering technology and what has sort of like progressed with there. And just manufacturing technology in general now is so crazy with like 3D printing and like you're able to like, especially because I work in 3D. So it's not like, oh, I gotta sketch something out and then hand it to another person to make the 3D model of it. I can literally just make the 3D model, boom, print the thing, and like test things out and test ideas out really quickly.
Sounds like you're very excited
I am
and
very excited.
very how do you say in your slang? Hyped up.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like it. So, and it must be really hard actually on a personal level to be navigating this period where there's so much attention and also so much, I mean, like Time Magazine, and so much also financial questions, like things, the collapse of certain cryptocurrencies after
Sure.
Elon Musk did things. So it must be a little, I guess, worrisome because this idea that art is legitimizing this kind of very high market
Sure.
in numbers gives you a responsibility. Well, not only you, but it gives you a kind of responsibility, a little bit, I think,
A responsibility for what?
a kind of fear. I mean, this is just an intuition of mine,
Sure.
but if it's a question, I mean, it might not be. I also have systematic questions again. Oh,
Well,
look
what is the question
at
with this though?
but they don't come out on your screen.
That's, I think it's blocking out the white.
Yeah,
In terms
exactly.
of the, like Bitcoin and all that, like I
Mm,
don't give any shit about Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is
no,
gonna
I
do
know.
what it's gonna
You
do. Like,
explained that to me. You explained that to me. But if you look at it historically, like a parable, we talked about it the other time a little bit. The testing out of a certain different kind of exchange system,
yeah.
like blockchain, uh, you can test it out on things like art, see how it works,
Mhm.
and then it goes into the other parts of the world, maybe, if they can fix the energy consumption issue. Maybe, even if it's no longer autonomous, but connected to the Federal Reserve and so forth.
Sure.
So it happens in history that sometimes things that are a little bit new, like even the market economy itself, it was a little bit tested out with the birth of canvas. I mean, paintings used to be on wood, and then when when there was the beginning of the market economy and things being shipped around the world in the 1500s, they invented painting, oil painting on canvas, because you could roll it up and put it in a ship. So, and then that somehow anticipated things that then would happen in other fields, in other areas. With
That's interesting.
anyway, so I was just wondering if you felt a kind of responsibility in all of this. I watched this strange little video that came out where you're discussing the B20. I don't know, it was embedded in an ArtNet article. And
Yeah, I haven't even watched that, to be quite honest. I saw part of it though, that it's like I was having private conversations with Medicoven and he recorded the Zooms and now he's like releasing them as videos. It's kind of like, okay, that's not cool. What the fuck, dude? You never told me you were gonna do that. You never told me you were recording the video. It's like,
I
what
told
the
you,
fuck, dude?
did I tell you that I was recording the last time?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine. No,
okay.
I'm fine with that. And you also told me you were gonna release it.
Yes.
Like he didn't tell me any of that shit. He recorded it like a private, what I assumed was a private conversation, recorded it, then fucking released it. He told me none of this beforehand.
Well,
it's kind of like, that's not cool. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, well, that tells you something of the relations between artists and the power, let's say, of the collectors in history. Because from a legal perspective, you could easily block that and have it removed, but you probably wouldn't because of the fact that he owns certain things. And
I don't want to like go to freaking
no,
war,
but let's
but
not.
it's kind of like, come on, dude, what the fuck? Like, that's not cool. Like, especially because it's like, guy, we're on the same team here, and this stupid B20 thing. It's like, oh my god, I don't like. I'm so done with that thing. I never fucking wanted it. It's just like, dude, like, Jesus Christ.
I know, but
I'm helping your $70 million investment. I can tell you that, guy.
But it tells you something about part of the art world, you know?
Well, that's where I do disagree with that, because to be quite honest, I don't believe Medicoven is part of the art world. He's part of the crypto world. Yes, and that's the thing. I'm increasingly coming to the understanding. This part I don't want you to record, to be quite honest. But I'm starting to come to the understanding that these crypto people, they don't give a shit about the art. It is literally another digital crypto thing to them. They don't give a fuck if it's, a piece of art or a cat or a fucking little picture of whatever or a Bitcoin or whatever. They don't give any fuck about the art.
Well,
And so
I'm glad you have arrived at that conclusion, because I knew that before interviewing you. I knew that before.
Took me a second. And then, well, I guess it really only took me about another month. But yeah, it's like, come on, like, dude, like, and so they're super flaky, and they're just they're very susceptible to hype, and they're not thinking about this shit. Versus the traditional people that I've now started to talk to, and I think I needed to see, like, the traditional people versus the crypto people. It's just the level of seriousness, the level of attention to the actual art, the level of long-term thinking, the level of like context that they're trying to put this in. It's just night and day. Versus the crypto people, it's just like, here's a shiny new object on the blockchain. Do you want to buy it? Okay, and then 3 weeks later, it's like, I don't give a shit about that. On to the next shiny new object. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but I don't give a shit about crypto. I give a shit about art. So, like, you guys do your crypto thing. I don't want really to be a part of that, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so I'm really glad we got to that point. And that brings me, well, first I would like to know if you have any questions for me, because it's so impolite that I call you and then I just out there with so many questions. So I felt this time before I start, I should ask you that. I mean, you may have.
I think if I came there, I would actually have a lot of questions, but I can't really think of any right now.
Okay. Well, I still would like you to come. I mean,
I would definitely like to come.
Yeah.
We'll definitely make that happen. I love Italy. I will definitely come.
Yeah. And I have been thinking, as you know, I mean, otherwise I wouldn't waste your time and nor mine. But I have been thinking about how and if and in what way what you do could be somehow vehicled through our museum. I mean, of course. Now, I'm going to be really straight about some aspects. One aspect is that we have soft power, but we don't have hard power. I mean, what I mean by that is the Castello di Rivoli is not an American museum that is funded by a board, of people that give $40 million a year to the museum. No.
Okay.
We are
Is that how most museums in the United States are funded?
Most museums in the United States are privately owned. Basically, they're not public museums. The American government doesn't believe. There used to be a program called the National Endowment for the Arts, and supported.
That's not a thing anymore?
Not much. It doesn't have much money and it doesn't support much. You could say the Metropolitan Museum gets a little. Oh, by the way, I will be in New York to bring our Pontormo, Portrait of a Young Man, to the Met.
Nice.
I arrive, I think, on the 13th, hang the painting on the 15th because I have to spend 3 days in quarantine. And then the opening is on the 21st, and I leave back to Italy on the 22nd. But the Metropolitan is a very rare kind of museum where, for the American ones, where they have a little bit of money from the city of New York. But most money for museums in America is endowments by very wealthy people, and then you use the endowment money to pay the salaries and so forth. And then you have a board, and the board is, to be on the board, you have to give a lot of money every year. So one of the problems that there are in American museums, we can't record this because, again, I have all these problems.
Oh, good. This is just going to be the unrecorded one where we speak freely.
Yeah, well, I know, but I mean, if you don't mind, I am recording the whole thing.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just,
but I never release anything without editing and everything. But the problem in American museums is that the same people who are on the boards are also the people who buy art, right? They're big collectors. So they may sometimes influence the curators and the directors on what exhibitions to do. So there's something a little artificial there. Yeah. And basically, American museums have very rarely launched any artists. I mean.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, if you look at the career of artists, they're very kind of safe. And then they'll go to artists that the boards think are, good idea to show. European museums, I don't know about Chinese museums from this perspective, except that in generally Chinese museums belong to one person. It's funny
Oh, really?
because it's the communist, capitalist
So that's a
communist.
lot of power.
Yeah, but it's the government that kind of lets one individual make a museum and it becomes a private museum, but the government in China could take it away in 10 seconds.
Yeah, it's kind of,
So
you're
it's,
doing it at the behest of them.
yeah, but in Europe, the model was mainly public. So museums are publicly funded, and then you can get extra funding through sponsorship. For example, I don't know, our next show in June is a show about a curator who revolutionized art history in many ways. He's 80 years old, and it's for his kind of 80th birthday. And that's sponsored by Gucci. But it's a little bit of extra money. I mean, outside of the 200,000 that we put in the show, they'll give another 100 and you can do the show. So
And so what type of companies usually sponsor those things? Is it mostly fashion companies or what type of
yeah,
companies?
fashion, but the point that I'm making is that our budget is almost all public. So
Mhm.
because it's public, it's taxpayers' money. So many European museums have a lot of prestige, like Tate Modern and so on, but or the Pompidou or the Reina Sofia in Madrid, but they don't have a lot of money. So
Sure.
I can't like invite you and say I'm gonna spend $400,000 on showing your work. Can't do
So
that.
just out of curiosity, because I've never had a museum show like that, what is the money for? Like what is like in that thing you're doing with that curator guy, like where's the money actually going?
Oh, well, it goes in many things. I'm glad you have so many questions, but you have time, right? Because
I have time. Yeah. I have time.
I've got made a long list. So, but there are only 12 because I couldn't get through more than 12 the last time anyway. So, no, but I wanted to learn also and look at some of your images and see what you think about them. But to go back to this, the money, it's very simple. From the most basic thing, you have to pay guards, right? If you pay 10 people every day for 3 months, that's like $50,000 or $60,000 just
Okay.
in salaries. Then
Yeah, I
you
guess I forgot this is up for like a long time.
Yeah, of course. Then you have the catalog, for example. A catalog costs about $50,000. The graphic design is about 10,000, and then the essays, if there's an essay you commission, that's like 2 or 3,000, and then there's proofreaders, translators, rights for usage of pictures, and so forth. So it usually is about a 50,000. Then you have curators, if you have other curators. Then you have shipping. So if I take a Pontormo, you just look at what the Met is paying. I mean, they have to pay for my business class ticket over. They have to pay for my hotel. They have to pay for my per diem. And then they have to ship the artwork and pay the shipper. It's a pain. It's a very valuable painting. Uh, Valuable, again, I say historically valuable. It's
Sure.
not market valuable in that way. Uh,
So
and,
how
and
much, just out of curiosity, market wise, what would you say that painting is worth if it were for sale? Or is it like too hard to say?
too hard to say because it's a little bit like when you sold your thing. They didn't give an estimate because it
Mhm.
could have been very much or could have been very little. I would say after, for example, the exhibition at the Met of the Renaissance portrait.
Then it would be a lot
Also,
more.
yes, also because it's curated by my friend Carlo Falciani from the Getty, and he's kind of important intellectual in
Curator.
yes, of Renaissance work. He's the world
Mhm.
expert on Pontormo, but it's not a solo exhibition. It's an exhibition about the Medici portraits. There are about 20 paintings coming from different parts of Italy to the Met. But I think that it could go for as little as 800,000 to 80 million.
Oh, Jesus. Well, that's a range. That's quite the range.
But it depends because there are only 20 portraits of young men in there are only 20 in the world. and one belongs to Tom Hill in California, and we have one. So, but that can really change. But the thing is that we cannot sell any artwork. That's why we receive a lot of donations. Back to what I was telling you,
Why can't you sell it?
because we are a public museum.
But you can't sell things and just put them, you're not selling, you're selling it and putting it back into the museum. You can't do that.
No, we can't. In other words, it's a bottom. That's the value that we have. It's called eternity. So we're not allowed to sell. It belongs to the state. I mean, you would have to have, like, I don't know, the Nazis take over Italy, loot the paintings, sell them, but
I didn't know if like they just kind of, they sold some occasionally, if they're like, oh, this is, we could keep this one and or sell it and then buy a bunch of other ones, use it to like sort of cycle. They don't do that. No, any countries in Europe do that, and no countries in Europe do that.
No, there was a big scandal around the Royal Academy in London wanting to sell their Michelangelo, and because they had no money during the COVID, it was called.
I see.
But basically, they could have, because it's a private association originally of artists, the Royal Academy, and they threatened to, and then all these people chipped in money and they didn't sell it. But we, by statute, we can't. I mean, if the museum closed, the collection belongs to the regional government. It's like saying the state of California or the state.
How many pieces are in the collection? Ballpark.
Well, in terms of that's again one of those weird questions, because if you talk about a drawing, it's very different from a major installation or a major painting. But I would say that altogether, between Cerruti and Castello di Rivoli, contemporary art and historical art, because what's unique to us is that we're the first museum of contemporary art in the world that incorporated a historical collection. So it's the opposite of what the Met did by bringing in contemporary art on the rooftop. We did the reverse. But I would say that if you altogether, maybe it's 1,500 pieces.
Okay.
But if you think major installations or paintings, maybe, I don't know, 500.
Okay.
But the museum itself is kind of part of the collection because there are frescoes that are very beautiful. And the building is made by Juvarra, who was the major architect in the 1700s. So the building itself is kind of, but to go back to the thing you were asking. So the shipping, basically when one says, I want to do a show with 50 paintings that are major, that's $500,000 right there. You have to say an average. Yeah, it's an average of 10,000 per painting, and then some will cost 30 because comes from some top of the mountain, God knows where, and some will cost 2,000. So that's where all the money goes when you do historical art exhibitions, which is why after COVID, for public museums, it's almost impossible. I mean, it's almost impossible to go back to that format, because I think with the digital, with people like you and your million and however many visitors, the governments think, how can we spend all that money instead of for the hospital? And it's only for 100,000 people, 100,000 people are going to see the exhibition. So it's like an ethical, moral question that's being posed.
What do you think will kind of like happen to sort of like help that, or it'll just sort of slowly get out of it?
I don't know. I mean, I think that partially I have to develop more the digital parts, like Cosmo Digitale, do works online that are not documentation of works, but that are works that are just born for being online, whether they're participatory or not. On the one hand, to not seem obsolete, but my heart is in the question of eternity. And
what do you mean doing things online? I guess I don't know what you mean.
Well, we have something called the digital cosmos, which is not participatory, so it has the same passive nature of a museum. People don't have to comment or say they like it or nothing. But I've asked artists to do works. For example, Susan Phillips, she's a sound artist who did sound installations singing a cappella. I asked her if she would do something about the elegy, the loss of the old museum. So she basically sang a cappella on top of some images of Monet, the Nymphea flowers, in the Kunst Museum in the Beiler Foundation. And so it became.
And so these are like videos or things online just for like people to view.
Yeah, but they're videos that were not made to be ever in the space, because many videos, for example, Henri Sala builds really complex video installations with very large screens. I think I described his work to you the other time.
Wait, what's his name?
Henri, A-N-R-I.
Here, one second. Let me go.
I might have to send you a book about Henri Sala, just to send something physical. Ari, A-N-R-I, and then Sala, S-A-L-A. He just comes to my mind because he does video and sound, but it really has to do with the physical space. So, for example, he made with Pandora, he made like a virtual reconstruction of the museum in his studio in Berlin. And then he created a way so that the videos he made would move on the screen in the space. So you could either stand still and the films would go by you, and then there would be pauses like silence, and then other films would come, or you could walk with the film through the space to be in sync with its progression.
That's interesting.
So that was a very complex, kind of sophisticated installation. But as you rightly pointed out, the beginning of all this was with Nam June Paik, whom I met before he died. But Nam June Paik was coming out of something similar. It's interesting that you mention him because his impulse was a democratic impulse. He comes out of something called Fluxus, a Fluxus movement. Yoko Ono, John Lennon's wife, she was also part of Fluxus. And Fluxus was against high art, what you call the traditional art or fine art, and wanted to be like break that.
How do you spell that? Fluxus?
Fluxus, F-L-U-X-U-S, Fluxus. I guess I am doing those lessons for you, actually.
There it is. I tricked you. I
promised Christie's that if they would connect me, I would teach you anything you wanted. But I would like to learn also. So we'll get to that, I guess, because I really don't want to miss again. I felt like I missed completely asking you about the actual images, which is very important to me. But anyway, Fluxus was a movement that developed in the late 50s and 60s, and it was a radical democratic against fine arts, high art movement that believed in the breaking down of the boundaries between real life and art. And so television existed. And so he's the first one who brought the television, even as an object, not just the video recorded. Nam June Paik was very connected with the sculptural aspect of the TV set.
Yeah.
And then doing things like putting a candle, emptying the TV set and putting a lit candle in a piece that he did.
That's cool.
Homage to Buddha. But anyway, I say that it's interesting you mention him because one of my questions was about how you think, because I've been trying to think what's going on, with this.
You and me both. Yeah,
but I'm trying to think. So I'm starting to think now. This again, it might upset you, but it might not because
it probably won't.
Anyway, I think that if you think about the 1930s and 1940s, it was a moment of fascist governments in Europe, communist governments in Russia. And it was Roosevelt and New Deal governments in the US after the crisis, what they all had in common was they hated fine arts and they really liked popular culture and they wanted to be populist, to what the Russians called it socialist realism. It was figurative and you had to represent the workers, the workers in the factories. And in Italy and in Germany, it was called fascist realism. And in the US, it was just called realism. So you have these big, in Detroit, these big frescoes made by the Mexican muralists like Diego Rivera and all these, showing the workers and all this stuff and lots of people. So all of this art across the board went against intellectual high art, Marcel Duchamp or the Surrealists or the Picasso, the Cubists. Somehow there was a moment, and I think it has to do with the crisis of 1929. There was so much poverty and so many problems that suddenly they made very authoritarian kind of governments and investments into supporting artists, and artists had to do public art. So I have a feeling that this rise of the interest towards your work, but also others, falls into this, or art on the internet falls into this kind of new era of a sort of popular culture going against I know that, in fact, you agree and disagree, but I'm just going to finish the argument and then you can answer. So on the one hand, there's this attitude, I've been reading all these comments to your images.
On my stuff, I don't even read the comments.
Yeah, I know, but they're there and they're part of the system. I mean, if you didn't have anyone to release these to, it would somehow, the whole structure of the everydays would somehow collapse. I mean, I think it's not that you would do them just on your own and put them away, but you have to prove to someone that you're actually doing them. You put them out in the world.
So, I agree with that.
But just to finish this, I think that there's this public space called the internet, public space, like there's the public streets. And the other fashionable thing that's happening in the public space of the streets is let's call it the Banksy phenomenon. And all of these big giant wall paintings that, city officials can buy and commission, they come after the tattoos on the body. There's these big paintings on the buildings. So I have a feeling that somehow these two things, the public space in the urban environment and the public space on the internet, have ushered in a kind of intolerance for high art and a wish to make it kind of socialist realism or realism of today. And if that's the case, then how do we understand? In fact, it wouldn't have made any sense for Picasso to be painting Cubist paintings in the 1930s. It doesn't make any sense. But it's a period that then goes right before a huge development in art, which is abstract expressionism and all that just happens right after World War II. So it could be a moment of like populism, 5-10 years before something that then develops in let's call it culture, high art, whatever you want to call it, but that's no longer the high art of before, into which you might be going because of your curiosity towards us.
Maybe. I don't necessarily think that, maybe I'll just speak for myself, but I would say graffiti too. I don't think it's necessarily against high art. It's just like, I personally feel like a lot of high art, I guess one, I'll caveat this with, I didn't understand it at all. And I just like, it was just so, it's got a high barrier to entry. Let's say that. It's got a high barrier to entry because you have to sort of know a lot of stuff, a lot of history, and you have to understand why people did stuff. Because if you just look at it and it's just some fucking scribble on a wall, you're just, the fuck is that? You just look, it takes a lot of context. There's a lot of crap you have to like understand, it's not sometimes super visceral and super sort of immediate. And I think people have no attention span. And so it's sort of like, they want things that are very surface and very immediate. And okay, what's the next thing? Show me the thing. Okay, got that, the next thing. And so I think that's why, that's part of it. I think people look at it and it's gotten so sort of dense with, I don't know, a lack of a better term, intellectualism. I don't even know, like, you know, it's gotten so dense with like itself in a way that it's sort of like, it's not even for like the average person anymore. Like, and that's how I think most people view it, that it's like, they look at this shit and it's like the emperor's, you know,
New clothes.
new clothes, where it's like, the fucking banana on the wall. It's like, kind of like, and I look at the banana on the wall, it's like, okay, I have a very insanely broad definition of art. So it's sort of like, okay, whatever, it's art, sure, that's fine. Like, it doesn't piss me off. It's not like, whatever, it's like, whatever, that's fine. But a lot of people are like, what the fuck is this? This is just a bunch of jerk off fucking idiots talking to themselves. That's it. And it doesn't matter.
I know, but the thing is that that's what they thought in the 30s too. I mean, when Adolf Hitler said,
I think you might be right. I mean, to be quite honest, I think you might be right.
You know, they thought that avant-garde art of the early 20th century was incomprehensible. You needed too much context. All of those things you say, but
probably, I think you're probably right. I think it's
definitely, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not right, but there's, I think always that there are different.
It's an interesting theory.
Well, I think there's different levels on which you can see art. I mean, even your art, I'm trying to figure it out and figure out how it fits into my history of art, let's say.
Sure.
So, but there are many levels. There's something visceral in looking at a Jackson Pollock too. You know, it's like a dripping painting.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's visceral. But unless you understand it in the context, yeah, well, like you said, of the Second World War, maybe the atomic bomb and the pulverization, the atomization of life into nothing. And then you see those, you know, skies made by Jackson Pollock with dripping, then you appreciate it more. So probably if I were to understand how your work relates to this whole digital revolution, how it's somehow using it, but also commenting on it by trying to understand it, if I could figure that out, then there would be another level, you know, other than the visceral of I like that image or I don't like that image.
Yes, I agree. I think that is a good point, and I think it's definitely something to sort of like think about. I think the difference between now and then is everybody's seen the Jackson Pollock thing, and so it's one of these things where everybody sort of has like on some level internalized that anything can be art, that you just like yeah, splash something on the painting. And so I think it's kind of like there's a sense of like when anything is art, then it's sort of like, well, nothing is art. It goes back to just sort of like, do I like this or not? I don't know. It's one of these things where I don't know. That's an interesting theory. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't know either. So how about I ask you about your trip to Freeze, and what did that tell you? I mean, your trip to New York and to Freeze.
It was super interesting. I loved it. I thought it was just super fascinating. And I think I mean, I guess I'll speak for myself with like, you know, these sort of populists or this or that. Honestly, I think it comes down to just like on some levels, just sort of, I just wasn't interested in that world. It was just like, just as much as like what I do was just like no part of what you sort of like thought about. It was just like, that's exactly how it was for me. It was just like, that's their thing. I never heard of Freeze before. Like, you know, this is just like, I don't even know about this shit. I don't think about it. It's just like the work that I'm doing is not, nobody's looking at it in that context, including me. And so it's just kind of happening outside of the fine art world. And so I'm just giving it no thought. I don't know any of these artists.
Yeah, but now
But now it's like super interesting. Now it's like, oh wow, these is like I could spend hours. And like when I went to Hawaii a couple weeks ago too. Went to the art museum there, and it was like just super, super interesting. Like I could spend hours, like, you know, sort of like looking at that stuff and sort of like, you know, kind of thinking about it, because it's just opened up so many sort of like new ways of me looking at like what I'm doing and analyzing, like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, like even me, I'm kind of like, wait, what the hell am I doing? Whereas before I didn't really think about it. Like I was just like, whatever, I'm doing it. I don't really give a shit. I'm just doing it. Like, who cares? I never gave it any thought.
But so was there anything that really struck you that you thought was interesting, or something that you thought was horrible and really Emperor's New Clothes? Not recorded.
I mean, there's a lot that I thought was like not.
Because
I think the difference is now. I think the difference is now. So the difference before is I would very easily say a lot of the stuff was stupid. And now I don't just assume it's stupid. I just assume maybe I don't know enough about it. And maybe there's something I'm missing, and that this is actually has a lot of thought, and it's not stupid. I just don't understand it. Whereas before, to be quite honest, I think an immature attitude that it was like, I understand that, it's fucking stupid. Like, I feel like I can judge it. And now I think I know enough to know that I don't fucking know. And so now I'm kind of, I don't just like dismiss it as stupid. I just think, that's interesting. I probably just don't understand it. Instead of just being like, of course I understand it, and it's stupid and it sucks.
Yeah. Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think it was just a very immature, to be quite honest, sort of like attitude before.
But I mean, we have that attitude too.
I think the fine art world absolutely does have that attitude. If they know something, if they see something they don't understand, they're just like, they're even quicker to be like, that's not art. No, that's not it. And it's like, okay, well, you didn't even really think about it for a second there. You kind of just dismiss it pretty quick. So yeah, I think both sides do kind of have that attitude, that it's sort of very like, and when I see people looking at my pictures and being like, this took 2 seconds to make, or it has no message, and it's like, okay, come on, you didn't even look at it that close. Like I'm hiding little shit in it that it's like you're not even seeing. So you acting like it's like this has no message or something. It's like, come on. And it's like, you know, with the people being like, I looked through all the pictures in a day. I spent a full day looking at it. It's like you looked at 5,000 pictures in one day and decided you understand what it is and what it means. Shut the fuck up. That's just the most lazy bullshit thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, of course. But let's maybe look at, can we look at some of your pictures?
Sure. Do you want me to pull them up?
Well,
or if you want to pull them up, you can.
I mean, I just made you a little small, and I have your Instagram up in another window.
Oh, I like hid that other window. Let me see if I can unhide it.
I noticed that you have.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay.
This pepperoni.
I can't see it I can't see it in that other window.
No, but I'm not sharing the screen. Should I share?
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah. Just tell me. I can think. I'll know which way you're talking.
Because if you go onto your Instagram, then we don't have to share the screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
Not that I don't want to share any screen, but
no, it's all good.
But anyway, just some hours ago, you came out with this
pizza.
Yeah, the pepperoni power structure, and there was this funny artist statement that you put, which seems like you're making fun of the art world.
Maybe a little.
I mean, it looks like you're trying to make fun of those artists who put out the statement to show that they have all this.
Well, sometimes the statements are like, come on, is this the art or is it the fucking statement? Like, it's like sometimes it's sort of like, and that's where I go back to some of the art when it's so conceptual and there's no, like, in my opinion, almost no craft, then it's kind of like, okay, like that's too conceptual for me. Like, I need some craft. I need something where it's like, truly my kids couldn't do that. Like it's got to have that. Me personally, that's just me personally. I need to see some level of craft. And so when I see some shit that's just entirely message and it's entirely like trying, I think sometimes too, it's trying to talk over your head. And it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
are you trying to make this as easy as possible for everybody to understand? Or are you purposely trying to make this complicated to keep people out?
Right.
And that's the thing
Well,
that I think
you
sometimes.
know, one of the reasons I don't like art fairs is because most of the art is very bad. I mean, it's very, it hurts me, you know. I feel, I suffer to have to actually see so much bad art and move and move and move. So it's not like all art in the art world is good art. And one of the many ways that one of the problems in the American art world is that the schools, that they're academic. People go to schools, art schools, and the art school says you have to have an artist statement and you have to, they teach them how to do a studio visit, you know. So it's a bit academic, and I agree with you. So I was right to think that you're doing that. But I wonder if you're now, one of the things about that image of Mr. West, I
Mhm.
believe,
Do you know the full story of why I did that?
no, nothing.
Oh, okay. So I was on a club, you know what Clubhouse is?
Yes,
Yeah, so I
yes.
was on a Clubhouse with a guy. I sort of followed his work for 20 years. We never talked before. And so this was at like 9 o'clock at night. We talked and he's like, oh, did you do your picture? And I said, no, I haven't started my picture yet. I've got to finish it by midnight. So I had like 2.5 hours to finish. And I'm like, what should I do? You tell me. You tell me what to do. And he's like, oh, what do I? And he's like, pizza, something with like pepperoni pizza and like celebrities. And it was just like, okay, dude, that's the worst direction I've ever heard. And
But that
so
was last night.
that was last night. So he said that. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do something with pizza and celebrities.
So
And so
you
that's why I did that.
okay, that's the, let's say, efficient cause, what they say, what you call the efficient cause. It looks like you used some of the pictures that you had used in a February image of a year ago, where you had the audience, some of the members of the audience. Let me get the date of that. It was February 17 or something, where you did the Maurizio Cattelan.
Oh yeah, that was this year. I think that was this year.
Yes,
Yeah. So that's
February.
the thing. So there's a lot of like people that you'll see throughout the things where it's kind of like there's a lot of things that I purposely use over and over and over the exact same thing, the exact same 3D object. And so it wasn't that I used the same sort of like photos, it's that I have 3D models that I keep using over and over and over, the exact same ones. The other thing you'll notice, the birds, I always use literally the exact same birds are in hundreds of pictures. And it's very purposeful because it's sort of like, I just want birds. And it's one of those things where it's almost like my sort of like signature sort of like way of sort of like.
So, yeah, but here there are some images that are the same, like the girl with the
Yep.
long hair and the guy with his
Here, I
hands
can show you
behind his
why.
back.
So in the scene, you can see my screen.
Yes, let me make it bigger. I mean, I made it small, so I'll make it bigger. Yeah, I see.
So in this screen, this is kind of like how I work. And so in this, put you down here. So in this, I have all of these different objects that I can pull in very quickly to sort of like compose these scenes. And so in that, I have this group of people. And so here's these people, and these people have been in many, many different things. And it's always like these people. And I've got a bunch of people.
Just I interrupt you a second. You made these people, or
No,
you bought
somebody
them already?
else. These are real people that were scanned in 3D. And so these are like assets you can buy.
Right.
And so anybody can buy these, and they're mostly used for like architectural visualization. Okay. So if you want to build a $10 million building, you know, what is it going to look like before then? You use these people to show what it's going to look like. So there's certain people in here I like this one I don't use that much. This one I don't, and you know, it wouldn't really fit. And so there's certain ones of these like, and I can really sort of like quickly kind of like put down a sort of like ground, and then this sort of like shows what this kind of shows over here, the final image, what it will look like. So I can take these and I can take these people and sort of make a crowd from them, sort of scatter them on the ground very quickly and in
Are
all
they
different
bought? Are they bought from the same company or from many different places?
In this case, I'm pretty sure this company, because I became very popular, like people just give me stuff now. And so this company was just like, here, can you use our things? And I was like, okay. And so they just gave me these, I'm pretty sure. And this was years ago. I don't even remember where they came from, to be quite honest.
Okay.
And so here's like, I can very quickly make a giant crowd of these people by sort of like duplicating them.
Right.
And so I can also sort of like, okay, I don't want this one, or I want them to sort of like, be more like a crowd. I can make them all different sizes. Now you see like tiny people in with like big people, and do all different sort of like things with this crowd. And so now you can kind of make it look like this, or you can make it look like there's a bunch of them sort of like clustered together, but in
She
groups.
moved her legs. Excuse me, the lady with the white shirt that you see from behind, that's in the picture of yesterday, her legs were in a different position.
Oh, maybe it was just swapped.
Oh,
That
okay.
could be.
But
But yeah, that's why. So you'll see that in like a bunch of different pictures. There's a bunch of different sort of like models that I've used in all different sort of like contexts, that it's the same model. Obviously, like this Buzz Lightyear thing, I've used this like model of Buzz, and these guys, these like guards, I've used these guards in like
okay, but let
tons
me
and
ask
tons
the
of things.
question anyway. When you do this image of Buzz Lightyear with those people in front of it, and many of them are the same as yesterday's image, why do you choose those and not others, or the floor is different, or I mean, is there any
Why do I
context?
choose to use the same thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very similar in this celebrity picture of yesterday. It's not very similar to almost anything in the 5,000, even though the figures might come back in many occasions. But there aren't that many museum displays, let's say, where there's
No,
a
there's not that many museum displays. There's definitely not that many. There's a few. There's kind of there's this one. This
no,
is
but with the label on the wall.
with the label on the wall. Yeah, honestly, I think there's only those two.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah, I
so
don't think
here
there's
I am.
I don't think there's any more than that.
Here I am comparing those images. So in this image of last night, I'm going to ask something a little controversial. I don't know if we can actually ever tell anybody, but
Okay.
this is okay, a kind of a critique of the Emperor's New Clothes that you felt in Miami with that event. Although he was actually talking about the Emperor's New Clothes. Maurizio's thinking was that Basel, Miami was a place for the Emperor's New Clothes. So he might as well do that. It's like cynical act of his. But in
Sure.
this one, if I look at it, the first thing that comes to mind is that you're criticizing the dominant powers in the art world in the United States right now, which are speaking about, let's say, blackness and redressing. I mean, there's so many museum directors who have been fired or moved because they
That's not. I was literally just it's very funny because it's like that's definitely not. Like it was literally just like I went through the list of like models that I had, and I was like, okay, I was going to use Kim Kardashian because again, he said celebrities and pizza. And then it was sort of like, oh shit, I don't have any time. And so I just used Kanye West. Like
But
it
are
had
you
nothing to do with
aware?
him being black.
Okay, but are you aware of the fact that in the U.S. American art world right now, and also in the British one, there's a whole kind of revolution to
I will
replace.
say this. In the thing that I wrote, it was kind of making a little fun of the sort of like wokeness of everything as well. It was
What does
making
that
fun
mean?
of the just
What,
sort of like the kind of like everything's politically correct, and sort of like we're gonna like everything is a fucking power structure, and everything is like a fucking somebody's against somebody, and like this or that. So there was sort of like in the United States we call it sort of wokeness, or sort of like everything's this sort of dominating something, and it has nothing to do with the like black person. It's more so that everything is everybody's trying to sort of like in the United States claim that they're a victim of somebody who's oppressing them, and this is, you know,
Yeah, we're not
everybody,
talking
Trump
about
supporters, everybody, people on the left, people on the right, everybody is sort of like somebody's, you know, ruin. It's somebody else's fault that, you know, my life is the way it is. Both sides.
Okay, but if I look at the American art world right now, what I see is a intentional wish to redress the injustice of lack of black people in positions of power in the art
Yes.
world. I mean, that's like
Yep.
across the board.
Yeah. Isn't that the way it is in Europe too, or not really?
No, not at all, because Europe was not um, didn't have slaves. I mean, of course, the ancient Romans had slaves, but it's been a hell of a long time since there was slavery
Sure.
in Europe. And therefore, this issue of making amends, like happened in South Africa, you know, truth and reconciliation, that can't really happen here. What Europe was a colonial power.
Yeah.
So there are issues now, very big issues about restitution of collections of they were stolen from Africa and so forth. That is happening. I mean, Germany is, and France is restituting, and I mean that for sure. But not having been a country founded on an original, let's say, crime in a way. I mean, the crime in the U.S. was killing all the indigenous people, saying that they weren't there, and then bringing all the slaves to do the most menial tasks.
It kind of got us off the ground. That definitely was the first couple years.
Yeah, first couple years got you off the ground. But so it seems that that culture, and a little bit in the UK also, because of the incredible numbers of people coming from the colonies to the UK. So it's a very multiracial country. But this, what I see, you know, seen from outside, if I said this, no, I actually can't say this. I can't, because you could also put this on the internet like those.
I'm not gonna. I can assure you, I'm not. You can speak freely. It's up to you. I can assure you, I'm not gonna in no wanting to start shit or make anybody.
Well, I'm looking at this picture, and when I saw this picture, I said, "Whoa, Mike is gonna have a lot of trouble now, soon, very soon."
Oh, really? You thought that was gonna be like I was gonna get like people are gonna be really pissed?
In the art world.
Really?
In the high art world, because you're bringing together two cliches. You know, pepperone is like speaking about the Italians and, you know, make pizza and all that.
So funny because this is all just like,
yeah, I know it's subconscious probably, but what I saw was the first times. It's like the first image that I see in the middle of this political revolution where curators are, especially women, they're, you know, the white men are keeping their positions, but the women are getting booted out, and they're hiring all these other people that are descendants of the slaves, so contemporary Afro-American, to change the culture, change the collections, change everything from the inside.
Sure.
But the men are being really careful, like they're keeping their positions, like Glenn Lowry at MoMA or Richard Armstrong at Guggenheim. But Nancy Spector, the chief curator of Guggenheim, was booted out. And Naomi Beckwith is coming in. She's my friend, by the way. Naomi Beckwith is a marvelous Afro-American curator from the MCA in Chicago. She's a great friend of mine. But I mean, it's so repeated that it seems like there's something going on which is across the board, you know. And so
wait, let me just make sure I'm understanding this right. So you're saying there's kind of sort of this retribution and wanting to change things, but it's really just falling on booting the women out, and all the men are sort of somehow managing to keep their jobs.
The white men.
The white men, sure. Yes, that sounds about right. That doesn't super surprise me.
But all of the other positions that are being opened up, they're all being hired. I mean, it's almost
more diverse.
Well, I would say not necessarily so diverse. There are no indigenous curators being hired. It's very much descendants of Africans. It's like
Okay, gotcha.
it's
Sure.
not that diverse. It's not like Asians or all sorts of things. But it's so strong, the movement right now, that when I saw this image, I thought, oh my God, he's speaking about this new structure in
So
the
funny that it's like literally a buddy was just like pizza and celebrities, and it was just like, oh shit, I've got an hour. Like literally none of it had
I
nothing to
know,
do with
but
any of that.
let's see if in the next week or so somebody doesn't start.
Oh, great. Jesus Christ.
I,
That's the thing. I don't think that will happen at all, because to be quite honest, I say so. If I put out 3 paintings a year, and that's another thing that I think is very different with my work than other people's. I think there's so much work that I'm putting out, and I'm saying so much. I'm literally putting out 365 at least pieces of work per year, that I say so much shit. It's honestly kind of like Donald Trump, where he would just say so much dumb shit that it was very hard to focus on one thing, because it's like by the time you write that article about, oh, people said this, blah, blah, oh, I've already done 3 more things that could be equally as crazy. And so it's one of these things where it's like, it'll just get lost in the noise of like, and I think that the sort of downside of that is people look at everything I'm saying, and there's so much shit. Like, look how much we just discussed 1 hour or a half hour or whatever of this one image. Most people, like in the traditional art world, just like, yeah, it's stupid, pizza face, okay, done, next. Like, they're just like, there's no meaning to that. It's just random shit done, next. You know what I mean?
no, but I have
And so it's like an onslaught of ideas that it's very hard. Like your brain just shuts down because it's so much shit.
Okay, but let's see how the art world reacts to this. But let's see. But
I hope you're wrong.
Yeah, well, I hope I'm wrong too, to be honest, because I kind of felt a sort of motherly impulse when I saw this. I said, "Oh shit!" But anyway, anyway, to go back to this image, the scale of the body of people
Yep.
and the scale of the face is very much the scale of what I was talking to you about in terms of wall paintings in the urban environment. So, what does this mean? I mean, these passive viewers, uh, and sometimes I think that the audience has disappeared, that we're all producing things like what you just said. We're producing so much that we've become what they call prosumers, and there isn't actually any audience left. I mean, anyone to actually look at a picture. It's as if the individual singular subject, had somehow been evacuated. And when you were showing me how you were putting these figures, they're like chess pawns that you're just putting, chess pawns, almost as if they don't exist actually. And so these 2 questions I wanted to ask: do you think there is an audience, and why should there be one? Or is this enormous multiplication actually a kind of evacuation of the audience? And secondly, the scale with the image, the figurative image, which also reminds me of the 30s, the monumentalism of the 30s.
I think the scale I did, just because that's sort of like when you sort of go into a museum, and I think you see sort of a lot of modern art, it seems like it is at a scale like this, at least to me. A lot of the sort of like big spectacly Jeff Koons type shit is at like a semi-room size scale like this. Partially it is at that scale because I wanted, as a very sort of practical manner, is I wanted to show people looking at a big, very easy to see. I wanted you to immediately be able to see that it was Kanye West. And so I'm very clearly, like, when you say the audience has sort of faded away, I'm very much thinking about the audience when I make this work. And so the reason I made that head so big is because you're looking at it on a really small screen. You're going to look at it for about 2 seconds. I know most people are going to look at this picture for 2 seconds.
Okay.
And so I'm very much wanting to, like, I know you're going to take 2 seconds to look at it. So I want to make the face really big so that immediately you see it's Kanye West. But I also want you to see that there's people looking at it, and it's like in a gallery. And so for me to make it so that you immediately see it's Kanye West, I need to make the face really big. But if I put it just as big as the people, they would be blocking the face and you literally wouldn't be able to see it. So a lot of times I'm thinking about how fast people are sort of looking at these things and how little time they're going to put into thinking about it. And so I'm trying to make it as visceral as possible so that you can instantly get some message from it.
But when you go out in the street, you're in Charleston, right? Charleston. Do they have that fashion of these big, huge wall paintings that you can make for like $39 per square meter? The artist comes, and there's all these really famous artists that do it. They make these.
I wish that'd be sweet. There's very little like graffiti or like wall paintings or anything.
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
not called graffiti anymore. It's called something else.
Street art.
Street art. Yeah, that's what it's called, street art. But
So
now,
that's why I just went to a big conference in Hawaii of street art.
right, because it's this big thing in popular culture, and politicians like it because they can order it, and it can. And I think it has something to do with our fear of not doing things that are craft in the digital age. And so the fact that you think that a real person painted this big thing by hand, it gives it some sort of value. I mean, it's that craft question that you brought in before.
Actually, I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about. Are you talking about like a billboard?
No, it's these big wall paintings in the street. If you Google street art, you'll get tons of artists that can. They sell their they're like stars. Like there's a people of street art. Maybe it's a whole other art world that you need. You're gonna find out about.
You're talking about like
Yeah.
just big sort of like corporate paintings like this.
Well, there's very little that I like this one.
Like
Here,
this?
where you see the big face. Now, I tried to touch your screen. I can't touch your screen. Um, in the third
Yes?
row. What? Wait a minute. I've made you very small. This is a catastrophe. Just a minute. Gee. Okay, I made it bigger again. If you go to the third row, fourth row. Well, also the second row. You see these big faces, like the painting of the Joker film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're all over the world. These things. They're like exponentially growing all over the planet in big cities. And they have their own stars, and they travel around the world and do these things. And it's very commercial. You can order them, and they cost $29, $28, $39 per
Oh, I didn't know that.
foot or square meter. Yeah, it's a big thing happening. Well, I didn't know either before I started thinking about the public space in relation to you and the public space. So it just, because of this scale issue, when you're walking in the street and you see these big heads or big bodies, it's the same kind of scale that you're reproducing in yours in small. So I sometimes think it's because people are used to seeing on the screen, and so it's like an extension of that taste.
I think it's an extension of the acknowledgement of that attention span. That it's sort of like you need to make an impression very quickly because people aren't going to look at it for very long. Right. And so that's what I think it's different. And that's where I think the fine art world, if you get their attention, and this is just from my perspective, if you get their attention, then they'll spend an hour looking at one picture. But if you don't have their attention, then they're just going to dismiss it like everybody else. They're just going to, that's nothing. I'm not even looking at it.
Well, that's because our life, we don't have that much life.
It's necessary because there's so much shit coming at you. Like there's so much shit coming at you all day. Yes, so I think it's necessary to sort of like, and that's where I think my art is very influenced by social media. And I very much recognize that people's attention spans are very shortened and that I need to get my message in very quickly because otherwise people are not going to get it. So it needs to be something you can glance at and immediately sort of get a big message. So in that way, I would say it is very much a reaction to sort of the times that we live in and the sort of technological things, because I am very purposeful. And that's why, again, I have a shitload of followers more followers than anybody else in the sort of digital art spaces, because I recognize that. And other people do things and they don't recognize the role that sort of social media plays, and they don't recognize that people have very low attention spans. So they'll make works and it's like, yeah, that works, like nobody's gonna see it.
Yes, I understand. Did you make the face of Kanye West? I saw on the Tumblr that there was a photograph before it had all this skin, with pores and things.
No, that is another thing that I have. So like,
So you changed it. You put this.
yeah, that's again, like, I don't want to, something happens and I miss a day. So again, that's where I would where I put out a like very quick version so that I definitely didn't miss a day, and then kept working on it right up until midnight.
So when you say, so this particular skin and face of Mr. West, you made it
So see,
how?
it's a head. This is what the scene looks like.
Sorry, I can't
Oh,
see you. I have to go back. I don't know what I did. I'm somehow, oh, okay, here you are.
you see it?
Sorry. Yeah, okay.
So this is what the scene sort of like looks like if you kind of like step back. This is what it looks like, a bunch of people around this sort of like head, and there's kind of like a light up there. And so these pizza things are just kind of like sitting sort of like on him, and kind of like it looks like they're suspended.
Okay, now one thing that you're doing is turning the object.
I'm turning the camera.
You're turning the object, the head is being turned somehow by some camera, right?
Yep. So yeah. So if you look at this, it's kind of like, this is see this here. This is the sort of like virtual camera that shows the final thing. So here, let me make this a little smaller. I think you'll be able to see it.
Okay,
so
well,
this
is interesting because you're ending up with a photograph, with a flat image.
Yes.
But your technique is sculptural.
Yes, exactly. And so every day I'm working in a 3D environment, and then it gets flattened down to a 2D image, 100%. And so,
well, that's like Picasso in a way. I mean, strangely enough, when Cubism was invented, it was because they understood that in our brains we would put together all these images, and it would be like a synthesis. If I look at a cup, or I look at an object, like you look at your beeple or whatever on the sofa, you only see it frontally. But in your brain, you're processing all the memories you have of having seen it from the side, from behind, from above. So your brain kind of combines it. And what Picasso was trying to show was this a way in which our knowledge of an object in the world is actually a synthesis of all these different camera shots of the object. And so a small child might not know that a glass is round on the front and also on the back, but having seen it many times, they'll then
you don't need to show that. You can just use the simpler like form of it, and people still will fill in the rest themselves.
Yeah, but that question that is the reason why Picasso is important is the decomposition of an object, not representing it figuratively, but representing what your brain has had. So all these different facets of the object is like what your brain had as shots.
Yep.
To then put it together. And
that's
the fact that that's the essence of Cubism. The fact that actually, I have to plug this in. The essence of our time is also energy. Just 1 second.
Yeah.
Real problem. I just realized that the plug was looking at me and the battery was very low. And the fact that happened at that time, that's what I mean by trying to understand an artist in the context of the history, social history, economic, technological. I mean, it happened at the same time as Einstein is developing relativity. So, the idea that there's no objective real world out there, but it's all in relation. Time and space are connected, and it's all a question of relations, was all happening at the same time in those years. Uh, so anyway, what you,
That's
I don't know,
interesting.
yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but back to you. I mean, what I understand, which for you is banal, but for me was not, is that you paint, you make two-dimensional images, but your technique is sculptural.
Absolutely, 100%.
That's
Yeah.
weird.
It's
That's weird.
really, it's almost, I don't even think it's kind of, it's sculptural in a way at times, but it's also almost like this is kind of like how I sort of like make something. It starts out like just an empty void like this. And so what I used to do is sort of like take a cube and like I could make this cube into sort of like whatever shape I want. And so I could say, okay, I want, now there's 4 sort of faces on the cube. Now I want to make it like this. And now I can take this and very sort of like make this into any shape that I want by doing all these different things. And so I can sort of take this face and we can pull it out, and then we can pull a thing here. And then, now it's this shape. And so also with this shape, I can light this shape any way I want, and I can make it any material I want. So now I can say, okay, I want to make it a shiny material like this. And so now I apply this material and I can make this color, any color I want. And so now I can make it like this. I can make it so that it's super shiny. I can make it so that it's kind of, it's hard to see because there's no sort of ground or sky or anything. So now I can put a ground down. Now it looks like it's sitting on this. I could put some, now it looks like it's sitting in the like daylight. And I could change these lights and put them however I want. And so now, yeah, this is very sculptural. And so this is kind of how I worked before, making things like years ago that were very sort of, I would make different shapes and they would be, I would do all different things to make them. And so now here's one, and I can also say, okay, I want to have, a bunch of these shapes. And now I've got a bunch of them. I could say instead of them in a grid like this, I can make them in like a sort of radial sort of pattern and kind of make these sort of, whatever I want, and make
But
sort of
when
like
you're making your
abstract
images,
things like this.
but okay, just for a second, when you're making your everydays, you start just fooling around and messing around like intuitively?
No,
No.
not now. And this is how I used to make things like
Okay.
5-6 years ago. It's sort of like this. In that case, I would usually kind of just start messing around. I would just start and be like, okay, does this shape look cool? No. Okay, well, what if we change this? What if we kind of, do this? What if we make, this shiny? What if we sort of change the light to be over here? And it was just like gassing to like until I got something that felt like it was cool. And it was just like, oh, does this look interesting? Like, is this okay? Well, what if we made another one of these? And you can kind of infinitely sort of
Let
like,
me
okay,
ask you another question. Do you ever write your own software, or do you
no,
only buy products,
only
or
byproducts. I have
tools?
no sort of like interest in writing, and it's very, these programs are very complicated. Like this program is like $3,000 or $4,000 to like buy it outright. It's very, very complicated. There's huge pieces of this program I don't understand at all, like huge pieces.
What's the name of this program you're talking about?
Cinema 4D.
Yeah.
So there's probably about 3 of these programs that are very, very popular for sort of like 3D. This is not the one that's used in like movies. That one's called Maya.
Nice.
Maya or Houdini. And there's ones even more complicated. Houdini is the most complicated. Houdini is like insanely complicated. And so like just these things that I'm doing in a few clicks would take way more time, but you can do anything. And so this one is sort of a good mix of like speed and sort of like it can do a lot. It can do more than I need, but it can do it very fast. And so I can iterate through ideas very, very quickly.
But you'd like to learn Houdini, for example?
Not really, because again, I want to move through ideas very quickly. I don't want to move. I don't need it to be like pixel perfect. I don't need to sort of like, because if I can't think of how to do it, I'll just do something different. I don't really want to like spend 3 days trying to figure out how to do exactly the thing I want. I'll just do something different. It's just not that interesting to me.
Sorry, I know that it's very late, and I think you might have other things to do.
I'm good. I've got some more time. It's up to you.
Well, okay. Well, no, something that has nothing to do with all of this, but I was thinking about games and children and playing, because partly, what you're doing is like a young boy kind of playing with the
Yes.
computer.
So that is actually because, oh, so here, let me just super quick sort of go. This is how I used to work. Now how I work is I have this thing, and it's exactly what you said. It is, that is actually the analogy I work. It's like a kid with toys. And so now, instead of sort of working from tiny shapes and sort of building everything from scratch, I have this big library of 3D toys, basically 3D models that I can put in immediately. And so now here's a guy with like, you know, a Nazi holding a rifle, and I can just put him into the scene in 2 clicks. And now this becomes the paintbrush. Now it's like, okay, well, what can I do with this guy? What if I put a bunch of them? What if I put one of them really big? Like, what if I put them and they're sort of like, and I've got all different things, all different types of characters, all different types of, you know, here's the cartoon things, here's a, you know, a bunch of different animals, and all of these things too can be sort of like manipulated in all different ways. So this pig here, if you look closely, you can see there's like bones. And so I can take and sort of like, it's called a rig, and I can sort of move the pig in any way that I want. And I can move it in like crazy ways too, that it's like, okay, well, here's a really long pig. I can do like anything, like unlimited possibilities of like how I can sort of manipulate.
But you're limited by the figures that are.
There's unlimited amounts of figures. So here we go. So if I don't have a figure, then I can go to this site, and there's a bunch of sites that sell these things, and it's like, name a thing.
Name a thing? An oyster.
Here's a shitload of oysters. What oyster do you want? And so again, I can buy one of these things.
I want the oyster in the middle on the 1, 2, 3, 4th row. Looks a little like a
this one.
4th row down. One more. Down.
This one.
The one, yeah, that one. That reminds me of the oyster where Botticelli has the Venus coming out.
So I can, right here, $39.
Well, you don't
now
have to buy it. Don't
this
buy
oyster and whatever. But it's I could show you how quickly it is that it's like, okay, boom, download it, put it into the, in about 2 minutes, I could have an oyster in this
Okay,
scene.
but who is the person putting that oyster on sale? I mean,
there's tons of people.
But it's
tons
like
of
a
people.
photograph?
What's up?
Is it a photograph or a painting?
It could be. Some of them are sort of like made from taking a bunch of photographs and stitching them together into a 3D model. That's called photogrammetry. Some things, and in the future, photogrammetry is going to be a lot better, and you'll be able to do it very quickly. Right now, it's kind of a pain in the ass. It's doable, but in the next probably 3 years, the cameras are on the phones are going to be good enough that it'll be very good. And you'll be able to like grab any object, you know, immediately and sort of like, okay, I want a 3D model of this. You'll put it down. You'll just move your phone around it, and it'll make a 3D model. You can do that now. It's a big pain in the ass. I can also buy it like cleaned up and a nice 3D model very quick.
Right. But do you think that because of the availability of all these images of objects and things, that's why there's figuration so much in your work?
Yeah, 100%. Yes. And so sort of like before this, I wanted to learn how to make everything myself. And so it was like, okay, if I want, you know, a person, like just making this model of this person or this pig would take you days. Like it's not like, oh, it'll take an hour. It's like, no, it's going to take you days.
When
like,
did you start? When did you start?
I started kind of doing it. If you look through the everydays, I started sort of like tiptoeing into that before I hit 10 years. And so if you look at, these are the things right before 10 years, mainly I started using trees and some people. But then when I hit 10 years, which was right here, this was the 10 years, I immediately, then it was like, okay, now there's no sort of like limits. I'm literally like, I will use anything. There's no, if I want something, then I'm just going to use it. And so that was like a very clear thing. And then I started using, you know, more models of just anything. Like before, I wouldn't even use like a car or something like that. Now I use cars, tanks, buildings, like anything I wanted. So it's like a scene like this with the whole city, I can make it very quickly. And so the work sort of like immediately changed then, because now it's like, oh, I want elephants with rockets on them. how the fuck am I gonna make an elephant? It'll take 3 weeks.
Oh,
Now I
there's your
just get an
guy
elephant.
again. Yeah.
What's up?
Now, no, there's your guy with the gun. I don't
Yep.
know
So
if
you
he's
can
a
see this
Nazi.
is like yeah, here's the guy right there in the gun. And in this context, it has different meaning than in this thing. And so, yeah, that guy has been, and so that's where I look at it as like, that's kind of the thing that makes my style unique is I have these certain people that are in a bunch of different things, almost like you would see, Basquiat used a bunch of crowns or, this or this person used this or that theme. So it's these models, I'm very intentionally using the same model over and over and over and over and over and over and over.
That's
so that when you
interesting.
look at something, you can immediately be like, okay, that's a beagle.
Okay, I understand. Sorry, I'm just ignoring. So I'm looking at your Instagram, but there's so many things. So you told me one inspiration for last night's was this conversation on Clubhouse. And what about the one before, for example, this kind of worm caterpillar?
Oh, because Eric Carle, do you know who that is?
No.
Okay, so Eric Carle wrote this book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
Okay.
And so it's funny you don't know that because it's very, very popular, like in the United States. And my wife was a third grade, or was like a school teacher. And so this was sort of like one of her favorite books was this Very Hungry Caterpillar. And it's like a kid's book that sort of shows this caterpillar eating through a bunch of stuff. And he wrote this like 50, 60 years ago, and he just died the day before. And so my sort of homage to him, he's like 90 or whatever. My homage to him was this very, very, very hungry caterpillar. Instead of he's eating food, he's eating people. So that's why I did that, because that day he died.
The day before this
the day before
in the mud.
This was very quick. It was just like, I gotta fucking get something out. It was just sort of this was one where I started from nothing, and it was just like, okay, throw this in, throw this in, throw this in, throw this in. And I had a different idea, and then I ran out of time, and it was like, okay, this one was sort of, there's not a whole huge lot of deep.
Okay. And the one before, this kind of mushrooms or whatever you want to call them?
This one was sort of like thinking about just like, some of them are just sort of like thinking about different scenes, and sort of like, this one was actually, I talked to a guy that day who sort of like invested in a bunch of like psilocybin and sort of like mushroom, like psychedelics for like, I don't know if you've heard, like you could use like ayahuasca and psychedelics for therapy. Yeah. And so this was sort of like, kind of inspired by our conversation that I talked to him like a bunch that day.
So there seems to be daily life coming in here. And the one
100%. Absolutely. There's a ton. And it's funny, actually, this van, and I didn't realize this till afterwards. So we moved into a new space, and I have a friend who is like kind of staying with us, and he has like a van, and he like had the van in our space, and like, we kind of needed to tell him to get the fucking van out of the space, and it looks exactly like this. And so afterwards, it's like, oh shit, that seems like it's very like psychologically, I was kind of like projecting this.
Conscious, yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy with the hole in the head and the person in the place?
So this was like another sort of thing. This was one that I kind of had been wanting to sort of like do for a long time. Like sometimes I'll get an idea like this where it's like, it's more like just like an image that I really want to see. Like I had sort of been thinking about like people sort of like, and it didn't turn out quite how I was thinking. It took a slightly different direction, but I was more so thinking if there were like giants that kind of like existed. Like in this instance, it's sort of like these giants existed. We trashed the planet, and like now these giants died. And so there's these like giant like bodies like sort of littering the earth, and like people are sort of like bored through them and sort of like using them for homes and using them for like different stuff. Like we've kind of destroyed the earth, but these like this is 2,000 years in the future. Like,
right. It's a post-apocalyptic vision again.
Kind of, yeah. That we made these sort of like giant meat monster people, and sort of that didn't work, and we like trashed the planet, and like
Is that anybody in particular?
No, it was sort of like, this was kind of the like techno king person. Like it's sort of like, which I don't know what that means. It's sort of like when I think of techno king, it's sort of like this person who's kind of the person who sort of like, I think I've been sort of like playing with a lot of kind of themes around like worshiping technology in a way.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like the techno king is almost this like Jesus figure that sort of like controls technology and is sort of like, you know, the Jesus of technology. And so it's like, because I think technology is very much just like magic. It's like things that you just couldn't do before. Suddenly you can. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we can talk to a person on the other, like literally what we're doing. Like you had the show what we're doing, talking, you're in Italy, the other side of the world. Like you show this to somebody 200 years ago, it's literally magic. It is 100% magic. And so
I agree.
That's what technology is.
Yeah.
And sort of that's what the kind of like idea with the techno king is, that he's sort of this like Jesus magic person that kind of, it's not really magic, it's just technology.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, sometimes I think that that what we call kind of telepathy or serendipity, coincidences, telepathy is just because or magic, you know, is just because we don't know the physics. And I sometimes say to people, when there were no cell phone, I mean, if you had a cell phone in the 1500s, they would think it was magic. Or
I think about that a lot. Like I think how fun it would be sometimes to show somebody from then the things we have now. Like they would literally just like, what the they would just blow their mind. And so I think about like myself in the future, like what would be like blow my mind as like a person?
Well, probably that we don't need cell phones. And I mean, we don't actually need any of that, because if one can train entanglement and understand how that works properly, you don't actually need to put chips in people's bodies. It should just work automatically. That's why those sci-fi movies seem so silly. The ones where they, you know, put a kind of cell
They're
phone.
still using iPads 300 years in the future.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I often think that there's that well, because I was interested in theosophy, and you know, I think I spoke to you about Annie Besant. She was a big influence on me. Um, she was a 19th century theosophist, and anyway, one of her books is called Thought Forms, and there are all these experiments in sending thoughts, and you have to focus on them as if they're objects and they're hovering in front of you and they have a kind of image that you have to focus on, and then you send it to someone. So I used to do all these exercises. I know you might think I'm crazy. Yeah, send it. And then I telephone and say, did you just think about, you know, a round shape that was kind of scary? And actually, I think I had more yeses than nos. So at that point, I started to think that we don't have any idea about the technology, which is just embedded in the fact of entanglement, you know, because if I entangle a photon by splitting it, the two photons, they can be on the other side of the universe, but they dance together. So if you apply that to people's brains, it probably would work. It just needs a lot of training. So
you might have lost me there. You might have lost me there.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I know that's where people think
it's an interesting theory, though.
Well, now who would have thought that you could make quantum computers 20 years ago?
There's a lot of things like that. I mean, it's definitely that's a lot of things. And I think I don't see, and maybe it's just I don't know, but I think there's not a lot of people, there's not enough people, maybe I should say it that way. There's not enough people commenting and thinking about how technology is rapidly changing things. I am a perfect sort of example of that, product of that. A new technology emerged, NFTs, and then boom, I made a bunch of money. Like it didn't happen without that technology. Like, and so I think there's going to be a lot of weird things like that. And that's why there's a lot of weird things in my pictures. Part of the reason there's a lot of weird things in my pictures. because I think
Yes,
there's going to be a lot of weird things that happen in the future.
yes. Well, one of them that I'm going to try to plan on doing is saving certain things of the past, such as the museums. I mean, I see them endangered right now because of this incredible new wealth. And I
I don't
also,
think they're endangered.
well, I don't know. We have to make, I mean, I'm not sure about that because there's a tendency, well, there's two different sources of the danger. One is that the governments think that we should digitalize everything and then turn them into sort of storages because there's no authority given to the physical audiences that are so few people. So that's one risk. And the other risk is really, I think it's the financial unbalance. I mean, if a painting or an artwork sells for millions and millions, and the whole budget of a museum is maybe a fraction of that, a fraction, there could be some sort of turmoil or how do you say terremoto, earthquakes, you know, that and so it's a very delicate moment. It's delicate. It has to be carefully. I mean, carefully.
That's what I thought was
Balanced.
actually interesting, to bring it back to the stupid B20 thing, is a big part of the reason that sort of Metacoven, when he was trying to sell me on this shit, I don't know if you heard that, where he was kind of talking about how,
Yeah.
you know, that it has changed. It changed from like patrons and everything being public into like these private collections where people own everything. And so when he said that, it was kind of like, oh, that's very, you know, an interesting thought. Whether that was just a bunch of bullshit that he said just to fucking sell me on this stupid coin, who the fuck knows? But
I didn't understand. Maybe we should wind this down because it's afternoon where you are, but it's kind of evening here.
yeah, it's all good.
My thinking is not as clear as it was an hour and a half ago. But and therefore I didn't understand what you just said. Could you repeat that?
Well, I don't know if you saw the stuff where sort of when he was kind of trying to sell this to me and sort of like, you know, I think on some level this is his intent. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He
Where
was
he
sort of
said, yeah.
where he kind of said was sort of like sort of fractionalizing art like this and making it public, even though he's really kind of does not give any shit about the sort of physical piece of it, especially as much as I do. But he was sort of like, this is a way that a bunch of people could own art instead of just one person owning it. And so that's a way that it could sort of democratize it. And it could be a way to kind of like make it more public again, because everybody owns it. Everybody owns a small share of it versus just one JD Rockefeller owning it and putting it in his cigar lounge, and then nobody ever sees the painting again. And so he was sort of like, in the past, it used to be sort of how it sounds like it is in Europe, maybe still, where it is more public and it's more owned by everybody. But it's not like that now. And it's getting increasingly not like that. And so that's where he was sort of like, just the vague idea of kind of fractionalized ownership, it could bring it back to that.
Well, I disagree.
And again, I don't know if that's it. Again, that's where I want to say, I don't know, like.
I found that very naive when he said that, because
Could be.
ownership is not the same thing as the experience of art. I mean, if you own a Shakespeare book with the play, it's not the same thing as reading the play, as that interiorization of the experience, or watching the play in a theater. So ownership does not equal experience of art. That's not right.
But you can't experience art if somebody owns it and they lock it away. There is no experience.
No. Of course.
That's what I think it's sort of, so they are kind of a little tied together. Not the same, but if you own it, you can restrict access to it.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen that much. I mean, most rich people who buy art.
How much art is sitting in crates?
Oh, a lot, but there's a lot more in museums, I think. And a lot, no, I really don't think that the free ports, if you're talking about the free ports in Switzerland and so on, and in Singapore, there's a free port. Those were made by Lionel Bouvier, Bouvier.
Even the free ports, so, and besides the free ports, even just private collections. You've got, I was just at, to be quite honest, I was at Mugrabi's house and I saw his collection. He's got quite the collection. And it's one of these things where, you know, that's in his house, period.
Yeah, that's
Not
true.
available to see.
But most wealthy collections, when the collection dies, when the person dies, they're not all sold at auction, you know. A lot of them, the real goal is to become eternal, like the Carnegie or the Guggenheim and so on. So the entire collection of Soviet abstraction is because the Guggenheim Solomon made made it public after the death. So, I mean, Cerruti was a private collection, right? And he gave it all to us. So I think that the greatest aspiration of collectors is not that it gets sold and dispersed. That happens when they don't think enough and they die and their children and heirs sell it. But when they think a lot, it becomes like the Barnes collection in Philadelphia. So you only have to wait one generation, or the Medici becomes the Uffizi Museum. I don't think historically the best art is in collections, you know. Maybe
Yeah.
now in contemporary art, but it's a long story. I guess it's a long story, and I don't know where I'm going. So I think that I really enjoyed talking to you again. I didn't ask all those 12 questions.
How many did you get? Did you get any of them?
Yeah, I got a few. Whenever the conversation was weird because I brought something out of the blue. There was something that I did want to ask you about that's very personal. It's your opinion on the maybe excess time that we spend on the digital. For example, when you say sit down and work, which is the opposite of what people used to say, get up and work.
Yeah.
You know, when you had to go into the fields and pick the food or into the factory. There's something, you know, that has to do with obesity, with health, with blood circulation in your body, so many things.
It's not good sitting. It's not good sitting.
Yeah, and children, you know, so children growing up very screen based.
Time.
So I kind of wanted to know how you deal with that with your children, and if you just pop them in front of a screen.
No. We're definitely, I mean, we're not perfect. I'm not going to act like they've never, you know, seen an iPad or played a video game, but we're very much trying, you know, obviously recognize that it's not good. Like that doesn't seem to be like a huge debate. Like it seems pretty sort of unanimously kind of settled that sitting, not good. You know, getting a shitload of screen time, not good. Obviously, social media, like they're gonna be the last kids in the class to get an Instagram account. That I can assure you of, because I am acutely aware of how much of a mind fuck social media is. And I think I've been able to use it as a tool and use it, recognize the sort of pluses and minuses of it, but there's absolutely minuses, and there's absolutely minuses for me even mentally. And so I'm very acutely aware of it, and that's why I don't read the comments, because it's not healthy. I don't believe it's
okay.
healthy.
So you use the technology as a tool for your work, for your art, but you're not like one of those people who just want to be in their garage forever and have no healthy, you know, no sun, no swimming. Well, you went to Honolulu, I guess you got
no, because that's not like anything of one thing is not like, that's not interesting or like healthy. You need like a balance of the thing. So I like computers a lot and I spend a lot of time on computers, but I also recognize the like downsides of them. And I think that's one of the things I also see of the crypto community. It seems it seems to have a very immature attitude towards technology, where it can fix everything and everything's fucking great and there's no downsides to technology. And you know, it's kind of like, really, guys, that is so fucking stupid. You got to be kidding me.
Well, I think that it's very interesting that you think all of this, and so I'm happy you think all of this, because it portrays a skeptical person also. So not that I have that matters at all, what my judgment is, but I just think that. So I guess we can do one of two things. We can consider this like the second and complete conversation, and that's sort of where everything happened that we didn't know what, or we could have another conversation.
Yeah, I would like to have another conversation. I think it's very interesting, and like I definitely get a lot out of these, and it sort of definitely makes me think of what I'm doing in a different context and in different, and I'm really excited to look up these people too. And it definitely helps me sort of process some of this stuff differently and sort of like look at these works differently. So yeah, I would love to like talk again in a little bit.
Okay. By the way, speaking about our conversations, I was wondering if that Instagram image of the Dali, with the long legs, the animals,
Yeah.
the elephants, that was done very few days after we spoke, and you saw the Catalan with the long legs. Was that in any way related? Like you saw the long legs and you thought about the Dali long
No,
legs?
it was definitely because I spent a bunch of time looking at Dolly's work and looking at yeah, those like giant like elephant things, and it was like,
Right.
oh, that is freaking
But it
sweet.
was a
Yeah, it was
pure
100% because of that.
Okay, but it was a pure coincidence then that it was very few days after I showed you the Catalan. Could be
Wait, what is the Catalan?
the horse in our collection with the long legs.
Yeah, I don't remember. Honestly, that's the thing. I don't even remember fully. Like, I definitely do remember that horse thing with the like long legs. But I think it was mostly Dolly.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I was just wondering if subconsciously, because it was only like 3 days after. And so I thought, this is what I thought. Ah, Mike Winkelmann is so cultured and cultivated. He knows everything. He wanted to, how do you say, criticize Catalan, say Catalan copied Dali. That's what I thought. I really did.
I think you're giving me too much credit. You might be giving me a little too much credit.
But anyway,
I'll get there, but it's gonna take a second. It's gonna take it a sec. Well,
but
awesome.
anyway,
Yeah, let's find another time to chat.
yeah.
But this was super awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to talk here, and like I, get a lot out of these talks. So I definitely wish we could
No,
talk
wonderful.
again.
Yes, maybe when I'm in a couple of weeks, I'll be in the same time zone, so
Okay.
it could be interesting, and then eventually it would be good to think how we can do something beyond talking to each other and explaining things, uh, which makes sense for the museum, makes sense for you,
Yeah.
makes sense,
Yeah,
I
that'd be
don't
cool.
know.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would love to continue talking about how we can figure out like a show or a talk or something at the like
yeah,
museum.
or
Yeah.
at least a work for the start. I mean, a solo show, I have my museum pretty planned. By the way, you did a conversation with Jordan Wolfson, I noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jordan is one. I mean, he has a show at the museum in about. I keep pushing him back because of COVID. So it was supposed to be this year, then it's next year, then it's so
Wait, how far in advance are these shows planned out?
a solo exhibition. A while, at least like 2 years.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
but
crazy.
maybe that can change somehow if there's a format. I mean, it has to do with the fact that physical space is limited
Yeah,
and that the budget is very small. So
sure.
you can't just put on a show for like a day. So you do a show. Now we have Anna Imhoff as a solo show, and it's been on, for quite a while, and we'll be on until September. But the solo show is not the only way. There's also I'm very good at group shows. I mean, I'm very well known for the big group shows. And I am working on something which is called espressioni, which means expressionisms, which has to do with, well, I don't know what it has to do with. At this time of evening, I have no idea. But but it goes from cave paintings to today,
No,
and
that's
it has
cool.
and it has to do with how people have expressed things. I know that sounds so banal because it's so general, but it
No, it's
is,
interesting. The way people have sort of like expressed things over time has absolutely changed, and sort of like
yeah. And I
there's
wanted
a
to do
lot.
it because one of the things that I noticed in the history of culture and art is that when there's that expressionisms don't necessarily develop during times of crisis like wars or plagues, which is what normally people think. Oh, there's World War I, and then you have German expressionism because all these faces, emaciated people. Actually, that expressionism starts in the late 19th century and early 20th century with Egon Schiele or Edvard Munch, for example. And those are periods of great technological and scientific uh, revolution. And if you look in history, like the Renaissance collapses when the big scientific revolutions happen, like you discover that we're on a ball moving very quickly around the sun, and we're not on a stable, flat ground. And that really disrupted the humans they felt very small and
Mm,
fragile compared to the technology or the
mm.
science at the time.
That's interesting. And so
And
that's reflected in the art like
yes,
right away.
yes, so you don't have Renaissance, but you have in fact Pontormo or all of the Mannerists, or you have El Greco, and Tintoretto. So the body is like tormented or particularly expressive. And in literature, you have John Donne, No Man is an Island, and his
You can
religious
assume
poems.
any of these references I do not
Well, that doesn't matter. I will send you WhatsApp. But what I mean by this is that the thesis of this group show is that actually expressionisms, which is probably the main reason I was looking at your images at the beginning, because they are very expressionistic, actually. I mean, if you look, they're not, cold minimalist Liechtenstein. They're very kind of messy and so forth. The thesis is that the moment in history when there's the scientific and revolution is what, because it provokes a kind of fear, the human wants to like rise to the level of that science or
know.
technology, and it's like a Prometheus thing, and that comes with a kind of pushing of expression, like an exaggeration.
Mm,
Could be, for example, exaggerating doing one picture every day, for example, or it could be, um, if you look at the passage from the Romanesque art to the Gothic art, uh, it's before the plagues. It's not after the plagues. It's before,
mm,
and it comes when the horse starts to be used a lot, because there was horses in antiquity, but they didn't use them then. So then you have this whole crusades, the crusades, and the horse is connected with the crusades. It's like us talking on the internet. You don't know horses, no crusades, and and suddenly the art goes from Romanesque to Gothic, which is very expressionistic. So the theory is that the expressionism comes before all those catastrophes, usually. So I'm interested in, so the exhibition has like James Ensor masks, and Schiele, not 1920s expressionism. So this is what I'm working on now. It's a group show.
that's super
Um,
interesting.
yeah, so maybe as a beginning. The other thing is, I kind of launched the career of a lot of people like William Kentridge and people. And I never really started with like a solo show, because a solo show is a huge commitment to understanding on everyone's part. I mean, it's a huge commitment. And so sometimes it's nice to introduce something in a more light way,
Sure.
within a context of other things that are actually helpful to legitimize that work because of the context they're in. Um,
That's very interesting. So I'm actually planning, I don't know, I don't even know what the hell these things are called now, but I'm planning something for Art Basel that will be kind of,
that's in
you guess,
September.
that is in December, yeah.
No, September.
Oh, no, I'm doing the Miami Art Basel.
Oh, the Miami, because Basel, the real Art Basel is September 20th to September 26th
Where is that?
in Basel.
Oh, in Switzerland? Where? I don't even know where the hell it is,
Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Basel is in Switzerland. It's like 3 hours from here. It's a small town where the
I
whole.
guess, okay, so that's very interesting you say that, because I guess I was under the impression, and maybe I'm wrong, that the real Art Basel, that is the most sort of important version of Art Basel, is in Miami in December.
No, that's true for the American art world. Like
Gotcha.
the
And it's
Chinese
not true
art
for the
world.
entire world?
The real Art Basel is the real Art Basel, and that's in Basel, and it's in September, from September 20th to the 26th.
That would be cool to go. I wonder if we could make that happen. 20th to the 26th.
Yeah, but if you go to that and you're very few hours from Torino, you have to come to Torino then.
Oh, yeah. That's, I mean, yeah, if we were over there, we'd definitely stop down there. That would be interesting.
But if
Maybe
you
we'll try
do,
and make that happen.
yeah, but well, you can probably make almost anything happen right now if you want. But the question is, if you were to do something at Art Basel in September, I wouldn't, for example, do something in Espressioni in November, because it would give the impression that I just picked something out of Art Basel.
Sure.
I can't do that, I mean, it
Yeah,
would be a mistake.
No, I think there's no rush. We'll keep talking and figure out what sort of like, kind of like makes sense. And I'm still sort of like,
Oh, but what I'm saying is that if you do Basel in Miami and you don't do something in Art Basel in Basel, then you can do something in my little baby museum on the top of a mountain in November before, when we do but it doesn't have to mean you come, but I'm thinking that it could fit in this Espressioni. So it would be a pity, I have the Narcissus of Caravaggio in the show, and would be a kind of pity if you didn't, I mean, if we waited next year. I think we can wait like years to do a solo show. I can't plan that now. I mean, who knows, when I have to, and that's a huge commitment. I have to really feel, and you would have to feel that it's the right thing. And probably it would be right to make it tour, that it would be a solo show that we put together 5 museums. I don't know, Lacmaile, Castello di Rivoli, Kate, and then you do like a tour of the show. But that takes a while to prepare.
yeah, it does. And so I actually have the thing I'm doing that I'm doing in December is going to be, I would be very interested to see what you would even call what I'm doing, because I think a lot of people in the sort of traditional art world would probably not even call it a gallery show.
Well, what are you doing? I won't tell anybody. If you want my opinion, I can tell you my opinion.
Well, I'm going to show a bunch of the sort of like I'm going to show a big canvas of probably a canvas of the like 5,000 days. Similar to this. I don't know if have you seen the one?
Yes, I saw it. I saw something you did in Canada.
In Canada, yeah, something like that. So you can see like all the pictures. So we'll have some.
That's fine. I think
something like that, but it will also have some like installations and sort of some weird stuff. And it will be shown in a way like I'm just gonna find a space. Like most likely it's not gonna be attached to any gallery, because again, I just kind of want to do.
That's a good idea.
I want to do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, of course, but it won't be in the fair then.
Probably not. I don't know how the fair even works.
Well, no, the fair is galleries, but it's.
Then no, it probably won't be.
No. So you could get a big building like at the same time. Well, who might really, but I wouldn't. I don't know if you want to be attached to that. But the Rubels have a big building, but I think then you get attached to a collector. It's not a good idea. What could be very chic, but I don't know if they would do it, is the Perez Museum. The Perez Museum, like
I don't know.
Well, anyway, doesn't matter. But I think.
Where is it? It's in Miami?
Of course, yeah. It's the Elegant Museum.
I do not believe they would do this.
no. In fact, I said it and then I thought, no, they won't do it because, yeah, I understand. Well, um, what I'm interested in is something more radical than making a big canvas with everydays.
And that's not the whole thing. I can assure you there's many, many more things that are,
Well,
I
you're not
can't.
telling me the really radical, but no.
But it will be a mix of sort of like theatrical things and kind of like lighting, and it's not going to be like white walls. It's going to be like lights out. Like it's going to be more about like very sort of like a very kind of like what would an art show look like 100 years in the future? That's what I'm trying to sort of like imagine. I
That's
don't believe it's
great.
always just going to be white walls and hardwood floors and sort of two pieces on a wall. I don't believe that's how it will always be. I believe that's how it is now. I do not believe that is how it always will
Not
be.
in our museum. We don't have any white walls almost. We have
How
some.
many pieces do you have on each wall?
We don't have that many walls that we can hang on because our walls are frescoed.
Well, let's say this. How many pieces do you have in each room?
Generally one.
One? That to me is a waste of a room. So when you're saying I can't have a group show, it's because you have one. Of course, you can't have a bunch of shows. You have one fucking thing in a room.
Yeah, but a group show is like a solo show. Each one has one room, each artist.
You're not using the real estate as well as you could. You could put more things on that wall. And that's what I'm trying to do is like do something that feels different. So it's like, I think you would look at it and maybe you would be like, that's not even a gallery show. But I'm looking at it as like, okay, just because right now you go into a museum and you see one thing on a wall, that's one way to do it. It's not the only way to do it.
No, but you asked me if we have how many works in a room. As I told you, I don't have many walls where I can hang because I only have the third floor of the Yuvara building and then the Manikalunga. But all the other buildings, if you Google our place, the walls are frescoed and decorated. So
I
there's
see.
two portions where you can put a painting. But generally, we are known for arte povera. That's another whole story to tell you. The story of arte povera, post-minimalist anti-pop art coming from Italy. Arte povera, it's generally installations and with materials that are also sometimes organic and change, like Gilberto Zorio made artworks that Rosa Blu Rosa, that according to the temperature and the humidity, they would change color and so on.
That's cool.
And they invented something called installation art in the mid 60s, the arte povera artists, which then influenced the whole world, like Joseph Beuys and everybody else started doing installations. So when you say an installation, it might be made of many, many pieces, but it's one work. So when you ask me how many works do I put in one room, sometimes it's many things, but it's one installation.
One work. Yeah, and that's where I think there's room to do something that's more dense and has a lot of things. But
that's interesting.
Maybe would not be something that it won't look like a normal sort of like gallery show. It will be like the lights are out. It will be very sort of like it'll be foggy. It will be very different. It will be, instead of like a clear white room, it will be a foggy dark room with a bunch of lights and a bunch of screens and a bunch of like.
That's interesting. That sounds really interesting. Like in a way, it's coming a little bit from theater.
From theater, yes. It will be sort of like have you ever seen that Sleep No More in Brooklyn? It's like Promenade Theater, theater, where theater is happening sort of like in the like crowd. Like there will be like elements like that, where there will be sort of like things happening, sort of like artistic sort of like things, and like all of the kind of pieces of the sort of like experience, like the whole room will be kind of like the art. Instead of just the art's hanging on the wall, it's like all the people who are like serving drinks and stuff, like they'll have costumes that are very sort of like specific and sort of like part of the art experience and that. So the whole thing is like an experiential sort of like thing.
That's very interesting. I want to send you the name of an artwork and then leave you with that. But I don't know where the chat is. Where is it in this Zoom?
It's at the bottom. It should be at the bottom, or it says
Okay,
chat.
I know, I can see it now. One of the works I did with an artist many, many years ago was Pierre Huyghe. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's French, but he lives in Latin America now. And he created environments where life would be born as artworks. He's known for those things, which he did years after this piece. But this piece we did in the Sydney Opera House, Forest of Lines, 2008, I think it was. And basically, it makes me think of what you're saying, but completely different because there were no screens or anything. But we took out 2,000 chairs from the Sydney Opera House, and we put in 2,000 trees.
That's
without
cool.
Killing any tree. They were in the earth in pots. And then we put fog machines, dry ice. And then there was a girl who was singing. Her name was, I can't remember. She was playing the guitar like a Pied Piper, and she was singing a song that Pierre wrote about where the oldest forests in the world were in Queensland. So somehow
that's really cool.
You would follow and get lost in all these paths, and it was a kind of a directions. It was almost like a GPS, a map of how to get to a very.
Oh, but she was singing.
She was walking and playing the guitar in this.
Okay.
Path. The paths were in this forest in the Sydney Opera House, but not on the stage, in the whole place. And the song she was singing that you would kind of try to follow because you couldn't see very much was a song about how to get out of the Sydney Opera House, how to get out of Sydney, how to go to the north of the state, New South Wales, how to get to Queensland, how to get to this forest, and finally ask Prudence, the name was Prudence, how it all began. And that was this Prudence actually exists. It was a guard of a kind of a forest where there are the oldest trees on the planet, something like that, the oldest ecosystem on the planet.
That's really cool.
It was very beautiful. You might look it up.
It looks amazing. I'm looking at it now. Yeah, it looks absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It looks super cool.
Yeah, so that's one work in one room, to answer your question.
That's true. That's true. I mean, it depends on the work. It's more so when I see a giant room and then there's a picture like this big, and it's like, well, I get it. You're trying to like show the importance of that picture by having it be the only thing, but it's like, well, it comes at a cost.
Yeah, that's not what, we can't even do that because we don't have those kind of walls. But good. So
okay, awesome. Well, let's definitely find a time to talk again. I super appreciate you taking the time to talk here, and we'll definitely continue this conversation.
Yeah, maybe a couple of weeks or something.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, let me know when you're in New York, and we'll try and schedule something.
Okay. Molto bene. Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Ciao,
Thank
bye.
you.
Have a nice day.
You too. Bye.